factoring. So there's many different types of factoring, but we're going to focus on four main types today. We're going to start out with the basic factoring by the greatest common factor. Then we're going to be factoring by grouping. And finally, we're going to be factoring trinomials with the leading coefficient a being 1. And then we'll look at trinomials with the leading coefficient a being anything other than 1. So we're going to go ahead and start with the greatest common factor. Okay, so we have a fairly simple example starting off with that. So we're doing the greatest common factor right now, GCF. So when you're looking at what you're trying to factor, I would suggest looking at the numbers first, right? So we have a 4 and an 8 here. What you want to try to do with the numbers is pull out the number, the largest number that goes into all of them, which is the greatest common factor. So I could pull out a 2, but that's not the greatest common factor. That would just be a regular factor, right? So to pull out the greatest common factor, you got to think of the largest number that goes into both. Since 4 goes into 8, that is the greatest common factor. Factoring out the 4 out of here, just write the 4 like that. And then we open up a parenthesis to get us back what we had before. So I would need an x here. I pretty much took the 4 out, right? So the x would remain, and then 4 times what would give me back the 8, which is 2, right? And you could always check to see if you factored correctly by just popping this 4 back in here, right? Because 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 2 is 8. So yeah. Okay, so looking at another example having to do with the GCF, the greatest common factor. So what I suggest is you look at the numbers first. We have a 2 and an 8 here. Now the GCF would be the largest number that goes into both of them. Since 2 goes into 8, that's already the GCF. So I could pull a 2 out of this as far as the numbers are concerned, right? Now I mentioned that when you have variables, you want to pull out the one with the lowest exponent. You don't even have to think about it. So here the lowest exponent would be the 2, right? 2 is smaller than 3. That's the lowest exponent, so I'm just going to factor out x squared. So as far as the number, I factored out a 2, and as far as the variables, I factored out an x squared. So to get back to where I was, I would just need another x. And since everything's positive here, I don't have to worry about the signs yet. So 2 times what would give me back the 8, which is a 4. And I already took this x squared term outside. And this 1, we usually don't write it. I'm just showing you for this example. So again, you could always check your answer. You could pop this 2x squared back into here to see if we end up with the original expression that we're given. So just a quick recap, looking at the numbers, I saw that 2 was the largest number that went into both of these, so I pulled it out, factored it, and then with the variable, you just factor out the lowest exponent one, the one that has the lowest exponent. Okay, so I've done a couple. Why don't you guys go ahead and give this a shot? Pause the video and then just attempt it. So you see where you're having a hard time, and then I'll go over it with you. So here, I'm going to just stick to what I said. This is the GCF type of factoring. So just look at the numbers first. We have a 3 and an 18. I know that the 3 is negative, but here it doesn't really matter if you factor out a negative 3 or a positive 3. If you've noticed that 3 would be the GCF to pull out already. Because we have 3 and 18, and since 3 already goes into 18, that's already the GCF. So I'll just do it in 2 different cases for you. If you wanted to factor out a negative 3, you would need a 1 here to get back that negative 3. And then notice how there's a positive here, right? So I would need a negative sign here, because when I multiply the negative 3 back, it would give me a positive back. And 3 goes into 18 6 times, and the x squared, I did not touch that. So it would it would look like this if I factored out a negative 3. And notice if you pop that negative 3 back in, you get back what we had originally. So this is how it would be if you wanted to factor out a negative 3. You could also factor out a positive 3. In this case, it doesn't matter. It's up to you. So this is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to factor out a positive 3. This time you would need a negative sign there, right, to get back the negative 3. And then since there's a positive sign here, I would just keep it positive, and then 3 goes into 18 6 times, and I did not touch the variable in this example. So, you know, two different ways that you can factor this. You can factor out a -3 or a +3. Okay, this is the second example that I wanted you guys to try. I'm assuming that you already gave it a shot, so I'm just going to go over it with you. Okay, so as far as the numbers are concerned, we have a 12 and a 32. 12 does not go into 32, right? So it's not the GCF. So then you got to start thinking of other numbers, the largest number that would go into 12 and 32 at the same time. I would probably think it's 4. You know, you could just play around with it, but I think it's 4. So I'm going to pull a 4 out as far as the numbers are concerned, right? And then remember when I told you you want to factor out the variables with the lowest exponent. So this guy has an exponent. Since these other variables don't, I'll just give him an exponent. Because if they don't have an exponent, we're assuming it's a 1 there. So I'm going to look at the variables individually. We have an x, right? So I'm just going to look at the x's right now. It's x to the first power, right? As opposed to x to the third power. The lowest one is x to the first power. So I'm going to pull out an x to the first power, as far as the x's are concerned. Then when I look at the y's, they're both to the first power. So that's the lowest one. So I'm just going to pull out a y to the first power. And again, we usually don't write the ones here. Like if you see a professor or whatever, or a tutor, I'm just showing it for you. I mean, it's not wrong if you write them, we just generally don't. Okay, so then how would 4 get back into 12? You would need a 3, right? You have one x here and there's 3 x's here, right? So you would need 2 more x's to get back there. The y1 we took out, so I don't have to mess with it. Minus 4 goes into 32 8 times. X to the first power, I took it out. Don't have to worry about it. Y to the first power, I took it out. It's no longer there. That's the whole point of factoring, right? You pull it out. So again, you could pop this back in to see if you did it correctly. 4 times 3 is 12. X1, X2 is X3. Y1, you just pop it back in. There it is. 4 times -8 is -32. There's the X1, there's the Y1. So there you have it.